Matthew Murdoch is a broken man, his body beaten, his faith shattered. As he comes to, he sees Father Lantom. Lantom saved him after the events of Defenders, keeping him alive at the orphanage he grew up in. Matt isn't dead, but he isn't really living either. He's a shell of his former self, giving up on everything and everyone. Our reintroduction to Foggy and Karen show that they still believe Matt is dead, but Karen holds out hope that he's alive somewhere. In a flashback to the end of Season 2, it's revealed how Matt and Karen's conversation went after he told Karen he was Daredevil. Matt then befriends a nun, Sister Maggie, and they talk about his faith and how he essentially gave up on his religion. With a single line, we immediately understand the kind of headspace Matt is in.
I'm choosing to let them believe that I'm gone because I am. I'm not Joe. And I know my truth now.
What truth?
Well, that in front of this God, I'd rather die as the devil and live as Matt Murdoch.
The next day, his powers start to come back, and he's able to get on his feet more. He and Sister Maggie continue to bond, but Matt is still full of rage. So, he decides to go back out as a vigilante. He's landing some hits, but they're weaker. He's dodging some attacks, but slower. In the end, he loses to some common thieves and asks them to finish him off. However, before they can, a cop drives through, letting Matt escape. The next character that we're introduced to is FBI agent Ray Nadeem. It's his turn to talk to a high-level criminal that the FBI has been trying to get info from. He sits down to be greeted by Wilson Fisk.
What is it you're saying?
I want to make a deal.
Was it a mistake?
Matt talks to Father Lantom again.
Maybe that's a good thing to realize, Matthew. Maybe it's time for you to stop.
Oh, no, Father. My delusion was thinking God had anything to do with it. No, I'm not as capable as I was, but I don't get to choose who I am. I'm Daredevil. Not even God can stop that now.
Karen, now a fully fledged reporter, works a story where some of her past is alluded to. While she's talking to the witness, she learns that this girl is the same one that Matt saved the previous night. Fisk cuts a deal with the FBI to get out of prison in exchange for living in a penthouse, as long as he gives up criminals. Meanwhile, Matt investigates the van of the mugging he stopped and suits up again. This time, things go differently. He wins the fight relatively easily and ties them up. Back to Foggy, who feels lost without Matt, like he's lost a part of himself. Karen shows up and tells Foggy she thinks Matt's alive. Next, Matt tells the woman he saved that he caught the criminals. Fisk's convoy is attacked, and every single agent is killed, except one. One man with just a handgun takes out all of them with inhuman aim. Afterwards, Matt learns that Fisk is out.
Sorry. Goddamn Albanians killed everyone except Fisk.
Somebody said he's en route to the safe house.
It's a damn shit show. The FBI just let Wilson Fisk out of prison.
The news of Fisk's release spreads like wildfire, enraging many people who protest outside his penthouse. Matt and Karen both go to investigate, but just barely miss each other. We then learn that Foggy is having nightmares about Matt. Matt is about to leave when he starts hallucinating Fisk. The agent with inhuman aim is named Dex, and he talks about someone named Julie with the agent therapist. Matt sneaks up on Fisk's lawyer to interrogate him, but is interrupted by some FBI agents when he goes full stealth mode and takes most of them out. Next, Matt finally reunites with Foggy. He tells him that Matt Murdock is gone and he's going to go after Fisk. Matt only reached out to Foggy to pickpocket him, which he clearly feels bad about. Matt then goes back to his apartment for the first time in months and sighs in relief. He grabs one of his suits, but we don't know why just yet. Foggy racks his brain trying to deal with seeing Matt again and thinking Fisk might come after him. He decides to run for district attorney. Meanwhile, we figure out where Matt is going. He's at a prison where he uses Foggy's ID to get in. He's there to dig up some information on Fisk, hoping to find something that will put him back in prison for good this time. He gets hit by the prisoner he was interviewing and is taken to the nurse's office. At the same time, Foggy tells Karen that Matt is alive, which only makes her more angry at him. While in the nurse's office, Matt is attacked. Then he answers a call where he learns that Fisk knows he's Daredevil. He turns to walk out the door, but there's no cut. That's right, it's Hallway Fight V3, and this time it's 11 minutes long. The music kicks in and the fight begins. It's really brutal, Matt taking some pretty hard hits and throwing some good ones himself. Matt fights his way through the prison and gains his information, learning that Fisk planned his release from prison into a safe house from the start. Matt narrowly escapes with his life, and the camera finally fades to black as he slips out of consciousness. Foggy, now running for DA, kickstarts his campaign with a speech at a union meeting for the NYPD. Matt finally wakes up, only to realize that his cab driver was replaced, and the criminal one drove the car into the river. We don't learn how, but Matt escapes. Meanwhile, Fisk manipulates the FBI into investigating Matt. He claims that Matt is a criminal that's done work for him for years. Karen gets picked up by the FBI for questioning, while Fisk combs through Dex's past to learn more about him. In some pretty neat flashbacks, Dex's past is shown in black and white, and Fisk watches on. A lot of Dex's past is shown in this episode, and Nadeem goes to find Foggy, where he claims that Matt is a criminal, and Foggy and Karen were aiding him for a long time. Dex goes on a date with Julie, a girl he has been stalking for potentially years. He quickly screws things up by revealing he knows more about her than he let on.
There's a second chance.
How did you know I worked there for 3 years? You were only there for 1.
You mentioned it earlier. You quit to do ballet.
Did I also mention ballet earlier? Specifically?
I guess I just assumed.
Anyway, it's late. I should get home.
You're ditching me?
No, not at all. I just have to go feed my dog.
You don't have a dog.
How do you know that?
Finally, Matt's whereabouts are shown. He makes it to his apartment and gets out before the FBI bursts in. At last, Matt goes to meet Karen, and she is pissed at him. However, Foggy later convinces her to help him. Fisk slowly begins to break down Dex, which only gets worse when the FBI launches an investigation into him. Karen tracks down the lead for Matt, where he shows up and saves her in the nick of time. They take the lead to the bulletin, where Karen works if you forgot, and Foggy gets Nadeem to go there and try and prove Matt's innocence. Meanwhile, Dex, seconds away from killing himself, gets a call from Fisk. He tells Dex he sent him a gift and that he'll never abandon him. At the bulletin, Matt and Foggy reconcile when Matt hears screaming. The lights go out, and someone starts killing people in the bulletin. We finally get a good look at him, and it's Daredevil. No, it's obvious to us that it's Dex, now in a Daredevil suit. Just as Dex is about to kill Foggy, the pair face off for the first time, and it's clear Matt has the upper hand. However, when they get some distance between them, Dex uses his inhuman aim to use office supplies as weapons. In the end, Dex wins this round and kills the only lead they had on Fisk. The media then crucifies Daredevil for the attack on the Bulletin, while Matt goes back to talk with Maggie. She asks Matt where he could have gotten a Daredevil suit in the first place, which leads Matt to Melvin, who made his gear in earlier seasons. Melvin traps Matt, telling him Fisk forced him to help frame Matt for being Daredevil that attacked the Bulletin. Matt breaks out and they briefly fight. However, when Matt hears the FBI approaching, they decide to team up and take them out. Matt escapes, but Melvin wasn't so lucky. Karen visits Ellison, her boss if you forgot, in the hospital. She claims that the attacker from the night before wasn't the real Daredevil. This makes Ellison question, how does she know this? Karen refuses to give up the identity of the real Daredevil, which results in Ellison firing her. Next, Matt goes to Nadim's house, where the two form an uneasy alliance after Matt tells him that the fake Daredevil is in the FBI. Meanwhile, Foggy continues his effort to take down Fisk in his own way by confronting his opponent for DA at some random event. Karen, however, has other plans. She goes to Fisk's penthouse, where in a fantastic scene, seriously, props to both actors in this one, Karen threatens him with the knowledge that she knows more about him than he thought. She's clearly baiting him, trying to get him to attack her so he'll get put back in prison. She's caught off guard, however, by his next question. Her reaction clearly confirms his suspicions, and then she reveals that she killed Wesley. This enrages Fisk, but just before he attacks her, Foggy steps in. Later, Matt and Nadim break into Dex's apartment. They're not able to find the suit, but Matt can smell the specific material that it's made of, confirming to the pair that Dex is the fake Daredevil. Dex returns home, forcing Matt and Nadim to get out ASAP. They escape, but Nadim gets shot in the process. As Dex's psyche continues to fracture due to Fisk's manipulation, we get back to Matt. He's training when he hears...
I don't know if I have the strength to get through this. He's so stubborn, full of fury and foolish pride. Please, watch over him. Keep him from making the same damn mistake that took you from us. Our son is too much like you, Jack.
Matt then goes to Father Lantom and heartbreakingly shames him for lying to Matt his whole life. Karen goes in search of Matt to warn him that Fisk knows his identity, but she finds Maggie instead. Maggie offers Karen temporary sanctuary at the church, which she accepts, and Matt starts hallucinating again, but this time it's his dad. After talking with his father, or rather himself, he confirms to himself,
You remain nothing.
We then learn that Maggie had postpartum depression, which is the reason she left Jack and Matt to go live as a nun. Nadim then goes to his boss's house to report his news on Dex. However, things don't go exactly as planned.
Ray, put down the gun, please.
Do you understand your situation?
Ray, you get this?
Yeah, boss. I understand.
I'm not your boss anymore. Wilson Fisk is.
Fisk lays a trap for Matt, but he figures it out and instead heads to Fisk's penthouse, although Fisk is nowhere to be seen. Matt then overhears that they know where Karen is and are going for her. Fisk will be back soon though, and Matt now has a choice: save Karen or take out Fisk. Of course, he goes to rescue Karen, knowing that when he comes back for Fisk, it'll be much harder than it was this time. And then the show grinds to a halt. Almost all of the next episode is about Karen's past, and while it does develop her character some, it's largely irrelevant to the main story, so I'm not going to cover it here. Back in the present, Dex arrives at the church, and Matt leaps into action just in time to save Karen. However, when Dex gains leverage for just a moment, Matt loses the only person that has been there for him his entire life, and with his surrogate father dead, round 2 starts. While Matt fares better than he did the first round, he still loses pretty badly. Just before he's killed, Karen is able to help him out, knocking Dex off a ledge. She cradles Matt in her arms as Matt passes out. Dex, enraged that he lost, kills 2 random guys in an alley and locks down the whole area. Matt finally awakes, and when he does, he and Karen hide just in time as the FBI searches the church. When they're able to stop hiding, Karen tries to convince Matt not to kill Fisk. However, they're still trapped. Meanwhile, Fisk gets released from custody. Matt calls Foggy, who comes to the church and surrenders Karen, but not to the FBI, to the NYPD. Then, Fisk tries to track down Nadim as Vanessa finally returns. Nadim, his family, and our main trio seek refuge with Brett, Foggy's childhood friend if you forgot, as they regroup and we learn Foggy's plan. Nadim and Matt prepare for court, while Foggy convinces the district attorney to meet with him and Matt. Fisk begins to push Dex away as Vanessa returns. Meanwhile, Matt and Foggy push for Nadim having full immunity. They don't get him full immunity, but he does get off with only 5 years total. Fisk then struggles to reconnect with Vanessa, which is where more of his humanity is shown. We see him go from a complete monster, a criminal mastermind, to just an awkward guy trying to connect with the only person he still cares for. It makes him feel more human, and while it may not make us as the audience feel bad for him, it does make us understand him. Case in point, he pulls out all the stops to hunt down Nadim. Dex tries to get back in good graces with Fisk, getting him the painting that Fisk got from Vanessa in Season 1, which represents his love for her. Matt and Nadim make their way to the courthouse, but they're ambushed along the way. The next action sequence is actually pretty cool, starting off with Matt telling Nadim where to shoot through the van. The whole sequence really uses Matt's powers pretty creatively, as he pretends to be led by Nadim and secretly tells him where the enemies are, and occasionally steps in to fight himself. They narrowly make it out and to the courthouse, where Nadim testifies. But it's never that easy. Just when it seems our heroes had finally won, Matt overhears that Fisk corrupted the whole jury. Nadim stupidly knocks out Foggy, leaving himself unprotected. He returns home, where he begins to record a goodbye message for his wife and child, seemingly prepared to die. And in a shocking reveal, Vanessa, not Fisk, orders the hit on Nadim. Nadim awaits his demise when Dex shows up. Nadim tries to reason with him, but it's useless. He reaches for his gun, but...
Whatever you need to do, you do it here.
No music, no flashy camera work, just a gunshot, trailing footsteps, and silence, filling the night sky. Matt storms off, telling Foggy they tried his way and it didn't work. Matt then interrogates one of Fisk's highest-ranking officers, where he learns more about Vanessa's hit on Nadim and Julie's death. Foggy gets called in by the FBI, which he and Karen immediately think is a trap. While there, he talks to Nadim's wife, who gives him the goodbye video. Matt then calls Dex and tells him Julie was killed by Fisk. Foggy and Karen finally watch Nadim's video, in which he makes his dying declaration and speaks on Fisk's whole operation. Foggy says it's admissible in court, which means they can use it to take Fisk down. Afterwards, Dex finds Julie's body. This only pushes him more over the edge, as we then see him in the Daredevil suit with Julie's corpse. Fisk and Vanessa's wedding begins as Nadim's dying declaration is leaked. Dex arrives and attacks Fisk, who escapes to his penthouse where Matt has just breached. The two finally face each other, and the final battle commences. Dex walks in, making it a three-way fight. This fight is awesome and brutal, some highlights being Fisk absolutely destroying Dex, and Matt finally being able to deflect Dex's ranged attacks. Matt gets the upper hand, and for one last time, he lets the devil out.
God knows I want you, but you don't get to destroy who I am. You will go back to prison, and you will live the rest of your miserable life in a cage, knowing you'll never have Vanessa. That this city rejected you. It beat you. I beat you.
Fisk is arrested, and as the score swells, we see Matt having defeated Fisk. He then goes to Maggie, where they make up and reminisce over Father Lantom. Speaking of which, Matt talks at his funeral, and in another heart-wrenching scene, he talks about Lantom and what he meant to him.
And see the possibilities of being a man without fear. It was his legacy. And now it's up to all of us to live up to it.
This symbolizes Matt moving on, reclaiming his own life as Matt Murdock instead of dying as the devil. In the final scene of Daredevil, Matt, Foggy, and Karen are back to normal, and they decide to restart the law firm. You might have wondered why I titled this video, The Tragic Masterpiece, and here's why. Daredevil is gone, cancelled, in a cruel twist of fate. As Disney announced their new streaming service, they wanted their Marvel characters back from Netflix. Because of this, Netflix canceled not just Daredevil, but all of the Marvel Netflix shows. However, there was a grace period. After 2 years, Marvel gained all the rights back to these characters from Netflix. That grace period ended about a year ago, and I have hope. There have been many leaks and rumors saying Charlie Cox would return as Daredevil in Spider-Man No Way Home, and I for one could definitely see that happening. Also, the comic that the upcoming Hawkeye show features has Wilson Fisk in it, so who knows, maybe these characters aren't done just yet. I guess we'll find out soon. I adore this show, which I'm sure was clear throughout these videos. The performances are amazing, the soundtrack is brilliant, and it's simply art. This was the first piece of media I've ever seen that's made me feel something so powerful. This show made me love the character of Matt Murdock and his brutal quest for justice. This show made me start to care about and pay attention to cinematography, lighting, script, and so much more. More than anything, Daredevil has inspired me to create, to analyze, and learn about film. And that's what good art does. It makes you feel something. This series shows us why heroes are so important. It's not just about seeing some cool guy in a spandex suit beat the hell out of bad guys. It's about their journey to help people and how, even in our darkest moments, when all hope seems lost, they manage to always get back up. And that is art. That is Daredevil.